One guy named McDonald that was in the Navy, he'd actually fallen off of a battleship, and he was one of the prisoners there, and the North Vietnamese thought he was retarded because the guy just went in there and he acted stupid the whole time he was there at the Hanoi Hilton. And the colonel, the guy in charge, was an officer named Stockdale, and he got this guy to keep on acting retarded and acting with a lot of buffoonery, but he had him actually memorize every single name that was in the Hanoi Hilton to the tune of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And when the North Vietnamese, in a gesture of goodwill, released this man, he was able to go back to the United States and actually tell exactly how many prisoners were there and by name and with a by name list. So when they came back to the Paris Accords, the Americans at the State Department level said, "Okay, we know exactly who's in this prison camp at Hanoi Hilton, and we know who they are and how many you have." And that really shocked the North Vietnamese, right? It was part of a disinformation campaign too. Everybody probably heard about Jane Fonda and her act of treason during this time. She was a young woman, and she was an activist, and she thought she was doing a great thing, and she was kind of rebellious against her father, Henry Fonda, who was an actor. And she actually went to North Vietnam, and she sat on a anti-aircraft gun and got filmed and everything like that. And then when she was there, one of the officers that she shook hands with, one of the American officers, slipped her a note, basically said, "We're being tortured here." And Jane Fonda actually turned around and handed that to the commandant of Hanoi Hilton. Excuse me. That in itself is an act of treason, but what she did later was actually absolutely horrible and very influential to Nick Rowe. Nick Rowe was a Green Beret, right? Nick Rowe's cover story was, and it had been telling his interrogators in this camp in the jungle, that these guys were basically advisors. Green Berets were advisors, and they were just helping to make better living conditions for the Vietnamese. Jane Fonda told him that Green Berets were actually military advisors, and they trained the Vietnamese on how to resist the the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong. So that put Nick Rowe on an execution list. Nick Rowe was being walked to his execution, and that's when he escaped. He actually killed his handler or his guards to actually get out into the open and get onto that helicopter. All right. So there's a lot of rules in that too, and I was shocked as a student in SEER school to realize that there's laws of land warfare, and there's things that you're allowed to do and that you're not allowed to do as a prisoner of war. Right. Some of the other things we learned there in this first week was the Miss X files from Fort Devens or Fort Hunt. During World War II, they were actually in care packages from the Red Cross. They were sending in decks of cards. If you ripped these decks of cards apart, you made a map of Germany, things like that. Didn't work too much in the Japanese side on the Pacific theater because the Japanese were very brutal, and they didn't allow too many Red Cross messages or care packages coming to the prisoner of war. And you probably heard about the Bataan Death March, which is still practiced today, actually reenacted on Fort Bliss, where many of those soldiers were from, who got captured at the Battle of Bataan, and they were worked to death, which is, according to the laws of land warfare, prisoners are not supposed to work on battlefield emplacements, bridges, and things like that to help the enemy, but the Japanese forced them to do that. Next, we went into survive phase of the SEER acronym, and that's plants for food and medicinal purposes. We did kill classes on mammals, goats, and chickens, and rabbits. Learned how to butcher and cure meat or keep meat a little bit longer. Smoking and everything. We did expedient fishing and trapping, and that was all before we went on to our invasion mode. Once we got into our invasion mode, we had to go out and we basically had to run from guys from the 82nd. There were guys who were detailed to chase us, and we ran all over not on Fort Bragg or not on Camp McCall, but in some of the trading areas that are agreed upon with the memorandum of agreement. It was mostly farmers' fields and national forests, right? So during invasion, we put to test what we learned about camouflage, hide site selection, counter tracking, and tracking fundamentals, where I really got into, I really loved that part of it, and I became kind of attuned to that, especially after I got out of SEER school. We did that for 6 days, and we got kind of hungry. I did it in October, so we weren't that hungry. I mean, there was plenty of stuff where we could rob from gardens or feeder corn, and you know, with the guys that set up for corn patches for deer and stuff like that. We ate a lot of that kind of stuff. Roadkill, we actually picked up dead animals from the road, and in our little group that we were running in, we actually ate off of that for 3, 4, 5 days until we were actually captured, or what we thought we made it to our end point. We were then told we were captured, and we went to an actual prison camp on Camp McCall. That's where we went into the resistance mode. We'll talk about this, my first meeting with the bearded one, after word from, again, you two.
Throw away your old pillow right now, because what you're about to hear in this video may prevent serious health issues in the future.
Recent studies have shown that over 75% of people have back problems because they sleep in the wrong position. Sleeping in the wrong position.
I don't know if YouTube's going to like this, but most of this has been declassified. Is at the resistance camp, or what we call Camp Slappy on Camp McCall. Then back in 1990, they had the one called the one main interrogator called the bearded one. Hadn't met him yet or anything, and between all this interrogation and some of the acts of I shouldn't say violence, the acts of torture or some of the stuff that you could expect to be seeing. All the instructors there would speak with a heavy accent, whether it be Spanish or Russian or German, and I went into my first soft cell. There's a soft cell and a hard cell. Soft cell is where you get interrogated. We all had a cover story. My cover story is I was a mechanic, a 63 Bravo, and I had just been rolled up with these guys that I got captured with, and I didn't know anything of what was going on. Right? And the hard cell is where you get slapped around, tortured, put in cold water, put into a cell. I'm 6'4". You get put into a cell that's 5'5". It's like a wall walker. You can't actually stand up, and you can't sit down either. And you get left in there for hours, or you get put in a little cubby hole in a little box that's out in the heat, and you sweat a little bit. And you think you're there forever, but actually this whole resistance camp, we were only in there for 3. Well, we had to do an extra day. We were in there for 4 days. But I went into the soft cell interrogation, and my interrogator was, we went back and forth trying to get me to sign some papers, and I told him I couldn't sign, and my hands hurt, and all those kind of things. And but he push-ups. I didn't do very well, and I just basically gave him my name and my serial number. I was a mechanic, and he said, he kind of came out of character a little bit, and he said, you don't remember me, do you? I was like, no, this is the first time I've ever met you. And he goes, no, we met a couple weeks ago. You were handing me parachutes. You told everybody that you would kiss the bearded one, and the bearded one's waiting for you. He's out in the camp. I almost lost it there. I went into panic mode. I knew that I was in trouble, and my cover story was blown. And I went back into the wire gate, and there in the big compound was the biggest man I've ever seen in my life. Right? And he is actually a pretty nice guy in real life, a Baptist preacher and everything. He actually wrestled in the WWE against Andre the Giant, where Andre the Giant had a ranch out there in Illinois, North Carolina, not far from where this camp was at. So these guys were buddies. I didn't know anything about it. I'm from out west. I thought that WWE was fake, you know, and for real. And he was probably almost 7 foot tall. And he says, "Oh, LaRue, I've been waiting for you." And he reached out to grab me, and this part of his hand touched one nipple, and the other part went all the way across my chest. And I had a big chest. I was doing a lot of push-ups back then, and he squoze my nipples together. And I was standing up on my tiptoes. And they weren't allowed to actually hit you with a closed fist. But I'm looking up at this guy, and he hit me with an open hand. Reached back like this. He couldn't go all the way back like this, but he reached back like that. And when he hit my face, it was like somebody took a spade shovel and hit me across the face with a shovel. And he went to work on me, and I did a dance with the bearded one. And I never did get close enough to kiss him, because he just kept me straight arm on my tiptoes for most of the time he worked with me. That felt like a very, very long time. And that was my introduction to hard sell techniques. And then we got put in a formation and everything. We were all standing there. We had a camp leader, and we had what was called the War Baby, one of the youngest guys in there, and one of the shorter guys. And the War Baby, every time we resisted talking or we wouldn't conform to the rules of the camp, the Ward Baby got beat. So I felt sorry for that guy, because I wasn't conforming to nothing. During this time, inside this camp, they really get to beating you up on your culture, your cultural differences back in your home country, which was for us the United States, of course. And they said, "Okay, all the black guys come over here." Well, I'd go over there with the black guys. They said, "Hey, LaRue, you're not black." And I was like, "Oh, I'm half black." You know, so I get to sit down and all that. I was just continually trying to mess up their little scenarios and the way they were working it, to where they would break down our cultures or turn us against each other as prisoners. And that's one of the key points of going through SEER training, is staying together as a team, knowing that there is a chain of command. Even though you're a POW, you have to try to not only gather information, but you got to keep together as a cohesive unit, right? No matter where those guys are from, and or what service they're from. And I imagine during World War II it was even worse, because you had British, American, French, and several other nationalities inside these prison camps, resisting the Nazi attempts to break down the cultural differences and political differences. We had political discussions in there, and they would basically try to say that, "Oh, you're just being used, and you know, this country that you're from is just using you as cannon fodder." And they really did a really good job of making you feel horrible about where you're from. And but we did everything we could to maintain that. At the same time, we're gathering information. We're looking for weak points in the fence. We're trying not to build fighting positions and things like that. And remember, all my buddies are up in the towers. They're one of the ones on the slave markets that are dressed up as guards now and everything. But my whole face is swollen up, and my nose is on one side of my face and everything. And again, they put us in this formation to beat up the War Baby. And as the interrogators or the guards walked in front of you, you had to bend down and keep your head lower than their head, but you had to look up at them. Well, this little chick comes by me. She's about this tall. Well, I'm hurting. I can't get down that far. So the big black guy grabs me, and he pushes me up against the wall. And he says, "You didn't get down low enough. You didn't get loud." So all the guards started slapping me and hitting me on my already bruised face and already closed eye. And I was getting mad as hell. I was clenching up my fists. One of the guards got up close to my ear, and he says, "Unclench your fist, unclench your fist." Well, that black guy jumped in, and I can't remember his name, but he hawked a loogie like that, and he spit a big loogie across my face. Oh my God, that made me mad. And even though I was trying to act weak and tired and everything, I really, really wanted to fight right then. But you had to stay in character, and this is probably the most realistic training some of the most realistic training I've ever been through. And I was about ready to lose my temper to face a firing squad or not. But I unclenched my fists and everything. And that night, we had to go and witness somebody being shot at the firing squad. But what we didn't know was in my escape team, one of the guys had actually quit. We didn't know that. He'd actually dropped out of the training. The graduation rate was pretty low back then in 1990. Again, it's not part of the pipeline. You did not need this course, right? But we all sat there and we witnessed somebody with a bag over their head actually face a firing squad and get shot. You know, with the lights facing us and looking into it, this guy looked like he really got shot. I was like, where the hell am I at? This is real. And we'll continue on with the last day of SEER school after this word from YouTube. We're going to talk about my last day in Camp Slappy, there in the SEER course at Camp McCall back in 1990, right? And again, everything's based off of lessons that the military learned in either World War II, Korea, or Vietnam, right? Part of that training, after we witnessed somebody getting shot, was we would report back to our commander. We're looking for the weak points for the E in the acronym of SEER, which is escape. Now, if you guys would go back into your history, there's a movie called The Great Escape. Actually, they had broken down the camp into cells. Some guys made uniforms or civilian clothing. The other guys put evasion maps together. The other guys were digging tunnels, and they basically dug 3 different tunnels to the edge of the camp. And one of the tunnels was actually discovered and shut down, but they continued on. And only a certain amount of the prisoners were allowed to escape, right? So they picked, I think, 240, if I remember my numbers right. They 240 guys, 250 guys to escape that night. Only 180 made it out before they were thwarted and caught inside the tunnel. But the guys who did make it out were either in German uniform or German civilian clothes, had identification papers from another cell that had put together the paperwork and identification cards, breaching equipment, air systems made for the tunnels, all done by different cells inside of this prison camp. And one cell didn't know what the other one was working on. They didn't even know who was going to get to escape until just a few days before this planned escape was actually executed. What was amazing about that, if you look at the political ramifications for Nazi Germany, the German people were in absolute fear that 150 escaped prisoners were running all over their country. And a lot of the forces that were heading towards the Western Front were actually stopped and pulled back inside of Germany to find these guys. And they found most of them. There's only a handful actually escaped into Spain or into France. And out of all those people that were captured, 55 of them were actually taken off the road and executed, which turned out to be a war crime. And after the war, at the Nuremberg trials, the people that executed from that Stalag were actually put on trial, and I think a couple of them were hung. I'd have to go back and check on that, but I think a couple of these people were actually hung for actually going against it. Now remember, this is 1990. 1991, we actually went to the Gulf War, okay? I'd already been through SEER training, but I had not got my Green Beret yet. I hadn't actually finished the Green Beret training, so I did not get to go to the Gulf War. The Gulf War and the 100 hours that the ground forces went against Saddam Hussein's army in Kuwait, I was actually still in the Q course. But there were some British soldiers from the SC, kind of Bravo 20, years later. And Stan and Dan and the other guys, I actually got to sit, in 1994, I got to sit down in Norway and hear what happened to these guys. And I realized then that surviving SEER school would have really helped them out in the absolute torture, de-degradation of their not only their culture but their individualism inside of that prison that Saddam Hussein was running. And very, very good information. We take those notes of what these guys went through and we incorporate that back into our SEER training, which by 1994, I think it was after 94, that it actually became part of the pipeline, or actually part of it. We went from advanced training back into the basic training, and then all Green Berets actually had to go to the SEER C course. SEER, the C being, you're going to go to Camp Slappy, you're going to get in